Welcome to Mysteries of Writing, where many things are taken into deeper perspective. Today's episode will go over the three most important story elements. There are three key story elements that you want to keep in mind: characters, world building, and plot. Having these elements are essential for a compelling story and keeping the reader engaged into what the writer has to say. So you can have a great characters and a great plot, but a lack in world building, but still tell a great story. But you have great world building and an alright plot, but a lack in characters. So what's the difference? I will discuss that later in the video. So the order I'm going to go to is based on what writers love to focus on. So number one will be world building. World building is the opportunity to make the foundations, the world rules, etc. You are ultimately the creator, the eyes of your world. You are able to come up with all these ideas without anyone's telling you what to do. It's like you're the president of the United States or whatever kingdom. The world is in your hands, and it can be revolving around this one person or these group of people. It's whatever that you want to tell. And speaking of the story that you want to tell, and where it takes place, the possibilities are limitless. You can make any types of food, language, religion, whatever in your world. No one is telling you what your story is going to look like. And this world can come from your mind, like from a dream or something, or even based on a real place that you really liked whenever you visit it, or somewhere you want to visit, and you were like, okay, let's think of a fantasy world or just a world that I want to be in. And when you're thinking about world building, think about the world that you want to be in. Think of it as your perfect little scenario. And I'm no expert of world building and all that stuff, but I am a writer who has a broad imagination and likes to talk about things that goes on. And through my experience of writing, I lacked in world building. I was like, okay, my characters are in this place. They like it. One thing that I try to improve in each of my stories is getting better in world building, getting more into the exploration part of it and how things came to be in that world. And that's one thing that the readers are drawn into, is the world that the characters live in. And at least having a good foundation of what the world at least looks like would give them a good idea of what's to come, and it just sets the tone. But as the writer, you get to make your own rules, limitations, etc. Just don't overdo it. And what I mean by overdoing it is like taking 20 years to like make this perfect world, and you have no time to tell your story. We can just sit in our fantasy lands and enjoy so much of it, but we don't get too much into what really goes on. World building does sound like a nice constructive thing to do, but we eventually got to get into the reality of things. And that's where plot comes into play. Plot is that conflict. What is going on around the world that you live in? And it could be internal conflict that is happening inside of you or your characters, or it could be external conflict that is happening in your surroundings. And that plot encourages the characters to move in a certain direction, which could be forward, backwards, sidetrack them, whatever. And you can do that with any of your characters. It could be your protagonist, antagonist, whatever is a living being that can have human emotions, allow them to go through things. And that's one of the things as readers, we want to latch onto characters that have conflict and see them grow through it. And it doesn't have to be obstacles that like life or death situations. So it can be as simple as a small conflict, like a little a sibling feud. Okay, let's just say that I want this, I want that, or make the conflict that we as humans can relate to. And it doesn't have to be all high stakes. We like stakes. We like when there's something on the line. It's kind of like saying, if I don't do this, this will be the result of that. Like cause and effect, you know what I mean? Plot has full of cause and effects. Plot just gets you moving instead of being like a punching bag, just being forced to do something. You are act- actively doing something to move something forward or just get something moving. Characters, personally, my favorite story element to focus on out of the three, and when it comes to characters, the characters are who we latch on as someone who we wish to be, someone we want to avoid to become, or someone that is going through something that we can attach to. And the characters are people that are going through the plot and whatever is hitting them. And they're also exploring the world around them. The characters are a bridge between the world and the plot. It's so much fun just reading what the character is going through, whether it's good or bad. But we also get to like learn something. It can be either big or small, but no matter what, we are able to feel for the character. We have a reason to care. If there is not a reason to care about the character, why are we reading about it, or why as the writer are you writing about this character? As a writer, I take into consideration of why the characters are there. Are they there because not necessarily the plot needs them, because they have something to tell, or is it because the plot needs them for convenience? And you don't want characters just to be there for convenience because they're like this checkpoint to get out of your bucket list. Have your characters be there for their reasons and intentions. Let them play a role in the story that means something to them so we can latch onto them and relate to them as well. Let not be a convenience, a punching bag that are passive. We want to relate to the characters and what they're going through. It might be what we've been through, or might be currently going through, or something that we don't have to go through. These characters that we read about or might write about could be based on personal experience or different experiences that are witnessed through different types of medias like movies, TV shows, or something you might have read about, etc. We latch onto these characters as if they were actually us. That goes deep. What we would do or would not do. It's like that power of choice. See, each person is capable of making decisions. Right or wrong, good or bad. It's the power of choice. You always have at least two choices to make. And each of those choices has its upsides, downsides. Its reward, its consequence. You gain something, you lose something. How can characters plot and world building, when used effectively, make a compelling story? I believe having a balance with all three will make your story flow. Having too much of something or too little could feel a little chaotic in a way. Like let's say, like I said earlier, you can have like a great world but terrible characters. So if you focus too much on the world building, that could be great. Like it's great having a wonderful world that of your dreams and all. But if your characters are like on the back burner, just being there just to live there, or there's just not much for them, then it feels like your characters being left out. But having characters that are so great, but your world is kind of lacking a little bit, it just feels like you're praising your characters so much that the world doesn't have enough to shine. But having a balance that come to the middle will allow a line to come between them to like there's this middle piece. And there's always a middle piece in something. Like saying black and white in a shade of gray. Because everything has a shade of gray. And also with each of the elements, you gotta treat it in a way that it's not all black or white, but it does have that shade of gray that there's that middle that makes it something mean more than one side or the other. Like I said earlier in the video, that you can have great characters and plot but lacking world building, but a great world that's lacking characters. The difference between that is when you have characters that are in a story going through different types of conflicts and you develop them well as the story progresses. The readers are going to stay with them to the end, no matter what, because you have submitting something that they can't easily let go of, or it's something that keeps them reading the next page or the next chapter, and they don't want to stop. And even though the world might be like not the most enjoyable place in the world, they're still gonna read it. They're still want to know something about it because they have great characters and a great plot. But a great world and characters. Well, a great world. We love a great world. Don't get me wrong. However, if the characters feel out of place, we're going to feel out of place too. We're going to feel detached. And whenever something feels so alarming like an info dump, we would want to close the book and question ourselves, why was this in there? Why was this info dump in there? And I'll say the worst place to put an info dump is literally at the beginning. And here's something that a lot of writers get wrong when it comes to world building. So you want to make this great world and all that stuff. And you want to tell the reader everything about it. And they put it in the beginning, telling the history and what had happened and all that stuff. The reader wants to get into the story that the character lives in. But instead you're putting the world at the forefront as if the world is in danger. This is something you have to know. If not, you're not going to care about my story. But then you have your characters. Then you finally introduce your characters, and they're like, oh, I'm this person who has to save the world. Okay. You know, they'll feel more like a punching bag in an arena. And you don't want them to feel like that. And that's why I said earlier that you have to create that balance so that one line don't crosses the other, because if it does, then it it overshadows that thing. Think of it as expectations. So you're having so much high expectation of your world, but not as much as your characters. And if you flip that, it kind of feels the same way. But if you give each element like the same amount of expectations, we're going to take it more seriously. What I personally love about each element is, first of all, world building, though it's not my favorite. It is my least favorite of the three. But I love that I get to make my own rules about it, put my characters in there to see what happens. With plot, hey, I get to do whatever I want with them. It's like they're my little puppets. Like, I need you to do this, and like, just it's kind of like throw them in the lion's den, kind of how it turns out. So, and then the characters, what I love about them so much is making them really relatable and real. And I love putting bits and pieces of myself in them as well. And some things that I wish, some qualities that I would love to have as a fictional character, and some things just some positive qualities that I wish I would just own up to, like in real life, like probably be more confident when I'm talking or something. And I definitely have characters who would just speak their mind. So I would be careful what I say. Flipping 180 about world building, I I lack in world building, and even though I want to try to get better in it, it just feels like I'm missing something, or I'm like if I had to do research about it, because I hate doing research. That's the bottom line. But if I have to do it, I'll do it, and I'll definitely do my best. But it's just something that I just wouldn't want to spend my time on. And I feel like with world building, if I had to do some sort of research to do something to keep it accurate and all, I'm just like a little detached. With plot, it's like so many endless possibilities, but I like having the stories from my head, and it just clicks. And when I just don't write about it or just have a little side note immediately, I'm not remembering the events that I saw the first time that made me really want to write about it. And then with the characters, it's kind of the same way. Like what makes them stand out from everyone else? What makes them be themselves? Like what you know what I mean? And sometimes I really hate when I forget names, like especially minor characters as well. And you just want to get everyone involved, like in some way. And I want to get characters involved, but I feel like how am I going to do it in this one story? It's like I had to divide it up in different stories. And that's why I like writing short stories as well on the side. And they can be alternate stories because I feel like they have their own story to tell, even if it's not even canon. We are all storytellers in our own way, whether it is through writing, through films, or even just talking to people. We are telling our stories in our distinct, unique way that no one else can tell it. So, what to take away from this episode? Number one, the three key story elements: world building, plot, and characters. Make sure you have a balance and a line that they can not cross and overshadow another element. Number two, to make a compelling story is to use each of the elements effectively and have the story be relatable to us, the readers, so we can attach to the characters and have a reason to care about what they're going through in the world that they're living in, a place that we would like or maybe not want to be a part, because not all worlds are somewhere that we want to be in, or what the writer is trying to tell us about living in this world and what the characters are going through in that time. And number three, tell the story that you want to tell. It doesn't matter how the story comes to you, but if you want to tell that story or somehow get it down on paper, write it. It is your story to tell, and there's no one that can take that away.